Hi, this is Ren.
This is Casey.
And this is All Walks of Film. So we just did a double feature, not in one day, 2 days. We watched the original 1982 classic, Blade Runner, and the sequel directed by Denis Villeneuve. Yeah, so the original one was directed by Ridley Scott, most famously known for that and the original Alien, and also known for Prometheus, but he's done several great films throughout his career. You know, Ridley Scott is a master. We're really trying to do that. Well, Hollywood is really trying to do that with Denis Villeneuve. But as much as I actually like the film, it doesn't really hold even a small light to the original film.
Yeah, not in the least bit, because there was released on YouTube 3 short films, quote unquote, that are supposed to bridge the gap between the original and the sequel, which has been done before. Motherboard Vice did kind of similar videos with the Planet of the Apes franchise that were excellent, and there were books and comics that kind of did the same thing that were also excellent. It's not a bad idea, except you need to see those for this movie to make any sense, because it does the traditional, we're gonna put all the exposition at the beginning of the movie thing, but there's stuff that happens in these 3 shorts that you need to know for the movie to make sense. 2 of them are live action scenes with actors from the movie on the sets from the movie. So even though they technically take place during different time periods, it feels a lot more like they were deleted scenes that then they realized, oh shit, we needed that. And put it on YouTube. They're short films.
Yeah, it's really crazy, like, how important these scenes are, because I tried to avoid every single trailer I could. I wanted to go into the film as raw as possible. I like going into a movie blind, because that way any sort of external preconceived notions that I have with the film are kind of taken away. I can watch it as a blank slate. So I tried really hard to do that. But I was just curious to watch these films, but I wasn't expecting, and part of me, while watching it, I was like, oh, is this kind of going to be a spoiler for the film? No. If you're listening to this right now and you haven't seen Blade Runner 2049, you absolutely have to watch the original. I mean, that's just a given. But, in order to understand this film, you need to see these 3 shorts.
Mm-hmm. One of them is really excellent. It's a anime short, kind of in the vein of the Animatrix, directed by the guy who did Cowboy Bebop.
Yeah, it's called Blackout 2022.
Yeah, and it's phenomenal. Even if you're not a fan of Blade Runner, you're not planning on seeing the new one, whatever, totally check out that one. It's incredible. It works very well as a self-contained short, and in the context of the canon overall. But that is just phenomenal. It felt very much to me like Bad Shields United, which was a Tite Kubo short one-off manga that he did, and the original Ghost in the Shell anime film.
Yeah, while watching that, and then after seeing 2049, it felt like a much more faithful homage, but also kind of expanding the world in a way that this film really didn't
at all. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually really liked the second film about Dave Bautista's character. I like the interaction with the girl. And
the book, that was cute.
Yeah, and it made replicants seem a little bit more human than human than the original film did. You know, in a way of wow, they can actually be gentle, because that's something we didn't really see much of in the original Blade Runner film.
Look at the scene with him and Rachel.
Yeah, I mean, well, Rachel was gentle, but her model was different. She was programmed differently. When we're talking about
I wouldn't say she was gentle. You see a wasp on your, I would kill it.
And this guy is in the film literally having like maggot farms or whatever. I thought that was really cool. But like
Protein farms.
Yeah, but he gets killed like right afterwards, and it's
he's
like
barely in the film, which is a shame because he was the only character I actually liked in the entire movie.
There's a character that I like, but I think we're gonna be at odds on this.
Yeah, I guess we should just say spoiler alert from here on out.
Oh yeah, we're gonna spoil this.
As if we already kind of spoiled a lot, but whatever.
Yeah,
definitely. If you're gonna see it, you gotta watch those short films. And I would say that I would not exactly recommend the movie. Like, without getting into spoilers, I've seen Denis Villeneuve's other movies, Sicario and Arrival, and I liked the dinner scene in Sicario and almost nothing else. And I liked a lot of the production design and artistic quality to Arrival. But I honestly thought Arrival was terrible. And I would say out of those three, like, Blade Runner is my favorite because I hated it the least. But I also thought that it was phenomenally boring. Like, it felt like an exact cross between Sicario without the interesting bits and then Arrival without the interesting bits. So that's how I felt. So spoilers after this, but we're going to kind of have to fight it out a little bit.
Yeah, now I'm just checking this right now because I'm not sure. I think I've seen all of his films so far. Okay, not all of his films, but I've seen most of his films. I start out with Incendies, which Incendies is a fantastic movie. It does illustrate some of the issues that you have with him, which we'll get into a little bit later. I've seen Prisoners, which I really like. That was the one with Jake Gyllenhaal and Hugh Jackman. Enemy was Jake Gyllenhaal and Jake Gyllenhaal, which that was a really... I don't know. I've heard a lot of people didn't like it. It's kind of one of those like short but sweet, eerie, kind of contemplative movies. I think it works. Sicario, I agree. I wasn't a huge fan of. Arrival, while I liked it more than you, I wasn't really fond of anything that was outside of the Abbott and Costello characters.
Mm-hmm. The production design was very good. The language system that they created was impressive that it was very consistent. Like, this is definitely an example of them creating a language that actually functions, which was really an interesting concept. Denis Villeneuve has a real talent for accruing a team of true artists to do what they're best at. But I don't think he's good at what he does, honestly.
One of the things that I was worried, just based on some of the images that I saw, and, you know, this is something that we have a little bit of argument on, but it was nice to see a movie. Now, granted, while this isn't as good as the original, it was nice to see a movie that had sets that actually looked lived in, which, of course, Blade Runner has to have, but I was kind of worried that I wasn't going to get that at all in the movie.
I feel like we didn't get that in the movie.
I think we did in certain scenes. Particularly the slave labor camp and where Deckard lives to some extent.
We'll get into that. I will say also...
The junkyard? The junkyard looked great. Okay. We're going to be...
We'll definitely disagree on this. But yeah. I will say that between the two shallow, kind of obnoxious Blade Runner ripoffs we've had this year, being this movie and Ghost in the Shell, this one was definitely the better of the two, but I will also say it felt a lot more like the Ghost in the Shell movie than actual Blade Runner.
I disagree with you wholeheartedly. It felt like Blade Runner to me. It felt within the same universe as Blade Runner. Now, while I have some issues with the narrative, is more so getting into the third act of the film, which... this guy in third acts, what the hell? Like, seriously, like...
This is kind of a problem that a lot of stuff is having right now in American media, is having like really strong ideas that look great and having like a decent middle section and then just having no idea where to take it and just letting it fizzle out into nothing.
Well, I mean, either you aren't paying the writers enough or you're just not getting the right writers.
And more likely, you're not giving people enough time. Everything is so fast. Make it happen now. Go. Just like, it takes more time than that. You know, especially if you're writing, you have enough time to write a middle section and then, the deadline's in a week. We gotta just put something out there.
I like the film. I enjoyed a lot of aspects of the film. It is by no means a perfect film and no means a great film. This is a film that is very ambitious, but Denis Villeneuve is not the true auteur that Ridley Scott was or that other filmmakers that he's trying to emulate are. There's many aspects of this movie that made me feel like I would rather be watching Artificial Intelligence, because I actually like Artificial Intelligence to a certain extent, but that's another film that like that final act is just like, what the fuck movie. But I think it brings up some more interesting ideas than this film does.
I will say what really made me hate the movie after the fact was when you pitched the idea of a Blade Runner sequel directed by Nicholas Winding Refn. I was just like, oh shit, why didn't we have that movie?
Neon colors. You have issues of sexism and misogyny, which, like, and I'm not like trying to sound like an SJW, but like it's prevalent in this movie. Mm-hmm. I mean, like,
as it is with all of Denis Villeneuve's movies that I've seen.
I think it works best when he just doesn't have women in the movie.
Yeah. Which I should say so. He seems to be having a very difficult time letting go of this concept that good women are there for their men and stay home in the kitchen.
Yeah, I mean, Prisoners doesn't really have women that prevalent in the film, and Enemy, same thing. And yeah, those movies were better for it. I mean, some directors just can't do it. It's sad because
that with the guy who did Wind River, because he also did Hell or High Water, which was excellent in part because there were women in that movie.
Yeah. So I get that Hollywood is trying to push these directors to expand, but this is not a way to expand that. I did actually kind of like the hologram character. I thought there were many interesting aspects of her character. However, the problem is she isn't really a character, which is one of the reasons why I find it interesting, because the main character is projecting everything onto her, and that is an interesting concept that I think the movie is addressing.
Yes, it is kind of interesting how, even in the context of the movie, it's very bizarre to people that he is a replicant who has a robot friend that he knows isn't real. You know, I thought that was like a cute concept, but I feel like with a lot of other things in this movie, everything surrounding that idea was very half-baked and not thought out very well. For example, she is part of, you know, a long line, assembly line to speak of sort of household companions. You know, she's called Joy. Everything you want to hear, everything you want to see, she will be that thing. So essentially, it's kind of like a human model Alexa sort of a situation where, like, it's just a commonplace thing you find in your house. And, you know, it's a little nice, discreet government wiretap that you volunteer for. I mean, she is 100% being monitored by the government. We in the audience know this. The movie shows this. Never plays a part in the movie. She's like an assembly line manufactured product. Never really addressed in the movie. Never really discussed. It's totally there in her character, but it doesn't go anywhere or do anything. So he kind of felt like enough about it to have an interesting concept. So period.
well, it's addressing, to me, going on to this expansion, it's addressing the interesting idea of how somebody can be attached to something as abstract as that. It's definitely borrowing a lot from Samantha and Her.
But in Her, Samantha had a personality. We can talk all day about whether or not that's artificial or part of her programming or what, and now that's more interesting. This character had nothing specific about her. And that was embedded into the way she was written and designed. But also, Samantha has agency.
That's because Samantha is an artificial intelligence that has sentience. This character doesn't, and the movie is trying to contrast the two. That is what the movie is trying to project.
Okay.
By literally making her a projection too, which is kind of interesting.
And then immediately changing that.
No, she is still a projection throughout the entire film. There
okay, I see what you mean.
Yeah,
okay.
No.
Sure.
And it is sort of encompassing a lot of themes from the original film, but reappropriating them mainly with, well, imagine Blade Runner, but if you knew from the very beginning that Deckard was a replicant.
Which I don't think is a bad point to start off with for a sequel, because we all know that Deckard's a replicant. Yeah. We all kind of have an idea that Blade Runners are probably all replicants. You know, that's not I think that's probably the best place you could have started, honestly.
And Joe, a.k.a. Rick Deckard Jr., even though he isn't Rick Deckard Jr., because he isn't the son that this whole mystery and stuff is going. But given the fact that he is pretty much a Rick Deckard surrogate, so much to the point where it's like, did you really need Harrison Ford in it? You just did that for the money, right? Okay, I got you. But yeah, I mean, he's essentially Rick Deckard, but they kind of explore this idea of, how would a replicant lead their life if they weren't constantly on the run?
Yes, but okay, here's one of my problems with like his relationship with Joy. He's a Blade Runner. So he's a part of the, government system. He knows how a lot of this stuff works. He gets that. And he still is telling his wiretap all of his deep, dark, intimate secrets. And she knows everything about him. Why would you do that?
Because we as human beings have a longing for connection. And I think that's what the movie is trying to address. I think I
get that, but I think it would have been even more compelling if you could see that they had this relationship originally where he comes home, he unwinds with her, he tells her things maybe he shouldn't, but then as the movie progresses and he's getting more and more information,
but the movie did that!
No. He starts telling her less and less, or maybe starts telling her lies, or tries to misdirect her. And you could kind of see him giving up his connection with her and how that could affect him personally.
But he didn't do that because he was... I get what you're saying, but he didn't do that because he's not... Although he has a tough and exterior, like Deckard, there's a soft interior in there. He can't just be this gruff, aggressive person. He does that for a minute, and then he pulls back. Look back to the scene that... Rick Deckard essentially rapes Rachel.
Mm-hmm.
In that scene, he's very aggressive at first, and then he catches himself and he backs off. And then later in the film, he only wants to have the connection with her if she wants that from him. Do you not see that?
It's not original? That I don't see that. It's just that also taps into something that this was missing. The relationship with Joy. Her one thing that she wants to do is whatever he wants to do. And that is her one tiny little box and her one tiny little purpose in the movie. And she never strays from that. She never gets outside of that. She's never thinking beyond that. It's always just, what do you want me to do?
But that's because Joy isn't a character with agency. Joy isn't...
What I'm saying is, I'm not upset that is a character that's included in the movie. What I am upset about is that is a character included in the movie that's played into that, we're supposed to sympathize with that, that is a good thing, that's the way things just should be. In the original Blade Runner, even if you want to, we could, not you and me, but, people can fight all day about the implications of Deckard's relationship with Rachel, and that's a very interesting dynamic. I personally think you can look at that exactly as toxic relationship, this is not the way to behave. I don't think the movie is trying to endorse raping women, holding them in their apartment, and having sex with them against their will. I really think that that is not what that scene is trying to say. But even if you look outside of that, you have characters who are designed to be, pleasure bots, sexual creatures, who are, hurt and have problems because of that, but who can go outside of that idea. There's more to that than just, well, they are sexual pleasure bots. That is their purpose in life. That is their function in the film. That is their relationship to the protagonist. And then that's it. In this one, it's supposed to be sweet. It's supposed to be endearing. You're supposed to get really invested in their relationship together because it's so cute that he thinks that his robot companion is real. And then the last thing she says to him is, "I love you," because that's the only thing she can do. No, I think you're stupid.
I think you're taking this way too seriously, and I think you're buying into the trap of the movie to try to get you to think that way. Joy is like Wilson in Castaway. Joy is not a character. Joy is a projection of his character. Joy is the inside of his soul, projected into another being.
Joy can call a prostitute for him. It's not that she couldn't ever have agency. It's that she does and she chooses not to. And that's supposed to be like an endearing quality about her. I get what you're trying to say, and I think that would have been a good idea, but what I'm saying is that is not the values that the movie actually has. I'm not against the idea of him having like a projected character or like having like a Wilson type character. I think that would be really interesting. A, I don't think the movie does that well at all, and B, it is 100% enforcing negative sexist stereotyping that fits right in with all the rest of its 1950s nostalgia.
Yeah, getting on to the 1950s nostalgia, I remember, when I saw the original film, one of the things that I loved about the original film is, unlike 90% of sci-fi that takes place in the American future, I'm not talking about, far sci-fi, like Star Trek and other things, or things that are taking place in a different universe, stuff that takes place relatively close to where we are. There seems to be this urge to have 1950s nostalgia. You get it with Fallout, you get it with tons of things, Passengers had stuff like that as well. It's like, you get the 50s diners, you get all this kind of stuff.
And even Kingsman Service had that, but played it as a cute joke, honestly.
Right, but it's one of those things that I get that that's when a lot of sci-fi came to the main public. That's when people were really invested into science fiction. You had the Twilight Zone, you had the Cold War scare films, you like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, The Day the Earth Stood Still, and the list goes on and on. I get that there is an appreciation to the roots of sci-fi, but not everything has to be this 50s mold. Elvis did not need to be in this movie. Marilyn Monroe did not need to be in this movie. Were they in the original?
Liberace did not need to be in this movie.
Right. Were they in the original? Were any celebrities in the original? No, the most you got was a geisha that was projected onto a blimp, or something like a blimp that, went across the city. That was the most you got. You didn't get Marilyn Monroe's face across the city.
It was probably Maiko, but we did have things like Coca-Cola, Atari, that kind of thing.
Right.
But those aren't people. I get what you're saying. More of what I kind of feel like with that particular thing. Did we get any 70s or 60s nostalgia with Blade Runner, the original one? Or was it trying to kind of create its own universe?
No, it very much was trying to create its own universe. You even had hairstyles that were created for the movie.
Were there pop songs in Blade Runner?
No.
Contemporary or otherwise? Was it trying to pretend
you did hear some Japanese music throughout the film, traditional.
Yeah, but there wasn't sort of this thing of, Well, it looks like the 80s, but that's because in that time period they're obsessed with the 80s. No one was trying to pull that nonsense. Getting back to what you were saying about Joy, you actually touched exactly on what I think the issue is with Denis Villeneuve specifically. The movie's production designers were trying to emulate your idea, and the script was not supporting it. There's the whole thing where the first time you see her, she keeps switching her outfit and her look based on her interactions with Kay, Joe, the main guy.
Yeah.
And you could tell that she's being reactive to what he's saying. She's trying to change to be what he wants her to be. Which could have been really clever if they kept that up throughout the movie. Looking at Joy could be a good indicator of what's going on with Kay. That would have been really interesting, and a reason why they couldn't do that is because that was not an idea supported by the writer or the director. That was too involved for that sort of thinking. I think that concept is great, but I don't think that the movie had enough substance to actually support that idea in the film. Because even though she's changing her outfits around, the way she acts and responds doesn't change. She's just always very wide-eyed, batting her eyelashes. I'll do anything for you. And most importantly, it's just fucking boring.
So, looking at some of the stuff that this guy's written before, the screenwriter, Michael Green, it's a little bit shoddy. Some of his more significant works include the TV series Kings and the first season of Heroes.
Oh.
He also did the screenplay for Logan.
Wow.
He also did 6 episodes of American Gods.
Holy shit, really?
He's also doing the Murder on the Orient Express adaptation.
Wait, so he's doing that kind of like really interesting work, complicated, layered, character-driven work recently. And he came out with this piece of crap script? Really?
It seems that he has been really busy.
That's I can kind of get that.
Because that's one of those things that, like, while watching the film, like I said, this is a good film, this is not a great film, and I think part of that is this script needed more time.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of my problem with Arrival, too, is I think Arrival has a terrible script, and I think that...
This guy did not work on Arrival.
No, I know. But watching Blade Runner, I'm like, wow, the mystery is not a mystery at all. The storyline is very linear, and then this happened. And then this happened. The characters are all very flat and one-dimensional across the board. The replicants are only as human because the humans are only as shallow as replicants, quite honestly. I can't believe that writer wrote this piece of crap. Really? I thought that this movie was on par with, well,
he also did Green Lantern, so...
Well, to be fair, I did compare this movie to Man of Steel and Batman v Superman a few times. Let me put it to you like this. Jared Leto's character is not a human being that's ever existed. Oh, I play God with replicants, so I speak almost exclusively in Bible passages. Get it?
Yeah, his character was too obvious. I mean, you got a character that looks like Jesus and quotes Bible verses
all day.
Yeah, and I thought his character was interesting in the first short film that we saw. I thought there were some interesting elements to his character in that, and like actually seeing his character play out in the film, you could have cut the character. Didn't really add much.
Have to be there because all of the actual work was being done by his replicant chick.
Yeah, and
the female Michael Shannon from Man of Steel.
Now, I did hear that this film is like trying to be like a trilogy, which, that's ambitious. Especially since like this film hints at things. It doesn't set up things for another film, which leads me to conclude that they weren't 100% confident in the film to begin with. The fact that it could end here or it could continue.
Well, honestly, I think that's just smart because so many movies end with a cliffhanger. and then never get a sequel.
Yeah, I could say with almost 100% certainty that Ryan Gosling's character is not coming back in the next movie, even though he's a replicant. As far as the Blade Runner world that I know of, well, now I don't. Because I was just going to say that, oh, well, characters don't come back. But then you had the scene where Rachel was brought back, which I will say...
She's not brought back.
Well, her essence, her body
just has a look-alike. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Which I will say, the CGI for her was fantastic.
Oh yeah, that was no Grandma Tarkin nonsense going on there.
We're getting damn close because other than some small things where I could tell, that is the best computer rendered person that I've seen to date. Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking about apes right now. I'm talking about human beings.
Not even human beings. A specific human being that we've seen.
Right. It was very well done. And part of me was like, they just rendered this with clips that they had from the original film. But no, this is a performance that's being given and it's really impressive. Just for this one moment, it was a moment where my jaw sort of dropped and just went, wow, this is really good work.
Mm-hmm. It was. It was definitely... It's one of those... This is my ongoing problem with the movie, was that was a moment of pure artistry in a terrible setup with no direction.
Yeah, there was another scene that I really liked because I like the setup, I like the scenario, and I kind of wish more of the movie looked like this. So, the junkyard. I loved the junkyard because... it looked like something that... And I'm talking about the open space of the junkyard because it looked tangible. So many of these CGI movies that we get, granted
including
we're getting
this one?
Yes. But so many of these movies, things don't look tangible. Things don't look like, you can actually touch them. But there was a lot of aspects of that in this film. Granted, there are parts that don't, but there are a lot of aspects of that in this film that I really appreciated because they look tangible. They look like a wide open space. I'm not talking about the aerial shots because I 100% agree with you on that one. Mm-hmm. But, in this scene with the junkyard, when he's flying through it and then he parks and then you see this huge just rubble around and, you see similar to the original film how there were scavengers trying to steal parts of his car. In fact, they stole a part of his car in the original.
Yeah.
But when he tries to get away, I kind of wish the movie had more of this because it just was something really clever that I really wish I had seen more of in the film, which was the kite gun. Mm-hmm. I thought that was really cool. The fact that, a storm's going, we don't really have the ability to take it down, but we're going to shoot this thing up that's going to put a kite and Ben Franklin that shit and, bring it down. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I think that was definitely one of the best setup, execution, delivery sort of moments in the movie because almost every moment in the movie had a good component to it, surrounded by this sort of emotional void. That was a situation where the world was excellent, the art was excellent, the character motivations was great, the action was really interesting. They had some ingenuity with the specific elements of it without having to over-explain it to an audience because we can all understand what's happening. And then actually have that deliver into something with consequence.
Well, yeah, and it... this whole feeling of being surrounded and everything like that and being kind of hopeless to, these people that just want your stuff. That created a tension that I would have liked to have seen more of in the film.
Yeah, that was an entire sequence that was competent filmmaking, in all honesty.
I guess we should get into it because I know that you keep on wanting to bring it up and I've kind of been talking about other things, but let's get into the sexual politics of this film because to start off with, the original...
I gotta say, starting off though, that's not my big hang-up with the movie.
Okay.
It is a hang-up because that's just a prevalent thing with this director, but I would not say that's even in the top 5 problems that this movie has.
Okay, well,
But yes, let's get into it. Why not?
getting into it. So the original film, I believe that Daryl Hannah's character was a pleasure bot of some sorts on the off-world.
She was a military / leisure.
Yeah, I'm not sure
Rebel.
about the snake lady, but I would assume sort of a
Given
similar
her demeanor,
yeah, given her demeanor and all that kind of stuff. But like,
she's a leisure model.
she was also an assassin. They were both trained to
Do other things.
they had agency.
They were also very different from one another.
They were also compelling characters. I have more empathy to the women in the original Blade Runner than I did with any of the guys except for Roy Batty, which
Roy was great.
Well, actually I can't say that because
Wait, am I getting them confused? I'm thinking of the toy maker.
I forget what the toy baker's name is, but no, Roy Batty is Rutger Hauer's character, Tears in the Rain, all that stuff.
That's not true. You also like Gaff.
Yeah, the original Blade Runner's great. Yeah. It was nice to see him for like next to nothing in this movie.
You weren't annoyed that now he's just a senior citizen stuck in an old people's home?
I was just kind of happy to see him, which I know, like...
With his Shakespeare goatee and all.
Well, he had that in the original, too.
No, I know. That's what I meant.
Yeah, I would have liked him as an older police officer, maybe, doing paperwork or like something, but just in a retirement home. Yeah, it's disappointing since like Battlestar Galactica wasn't that long ago. I mean, it's 10 years, but still, like if Harrison Ford...
I can't picture him with like a catheter, honestly.
Yeah, if Harrison Ford can do it, he can.
Mm-hmm. In this movie, you technically had like the leisure bot who is also a spy kind of thing, but doing a side-by-side comparison of, the girl with the pink hair and either of the women from the original Blade Runner, like literally take your pick, it doesn't matter. She's blank slate.
Are you talking about Mackenzie Davis? The woman from the Black Mirror episode, San Junipero?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because she had the blonde pink hair.
Yeah, the one that he had sex with through Joy.
Exactly, yeah. Okay. Like, she's a pleasure bot, but she was also part of, like, the replicant uprising army, and she was sent there to put a tracker in his jacket, whatever. She is fucking boring. There is nothing interesting about her whatsoever. There's nothing interesting about what she says, or how she behaves, or the way that she interacts with him. She's just a MacGuffin to further the plot along a little bit.
And it's a little disappointing because she set herself up to be human, and I was like, oh, that line that she said, so you're not interested in human women? And
no, she said you're not interested in real women.
Right. That's what I interpreted it as. Yeah. But, yeah. So it's just kind of disappointing that in the world of Blade Runner, there are rarely people. Mm-hmm. The more and more you get into this theorizing, well, now cemented, that, practically everybody's a replicant except for Gaff.
Pretty much.
I mean,
maybe Gaff is a replicant because if Deckard is running around making those little wooden animal figurines, maybe that's just like a thing from that generation of replicants. They just make little toy animals all the time.
You don't like the spirit animal stuff, but
no, it's not that I don't like the spirit animal stuff. It's just, it's one of those things where I'm like, take it all the way or don't do it at all, damn it.
Yeah, I will say so instead of the unicorn imagery, you have a horse in this movie, and given the fact...
Which is a perfect allegory. It's like if you took the original and took everything magical and unique about it.
Yeah, this is definitely... that kind of sums up this movie to a certain extent. Even though I like it, it's a unicorn without a horn.
Or a silver mane.
Yeah. But, yeah, like, once they introduced the wooden horse, for about 20 to 30 minutes, a horse with no name got stuck in my head, and I was like, they're gonna play this song in this movie, aren't they? And they didn't, but the plot of the movie fits that song.
But, okay, getting back on topic a little bit, look at the way Deckard interacts with the first replicant woman he killed, and the way that Kay interacts with the chick from San Junipero. And the other one, there's a lot more, like, sexuality on display. Like, you see her naked, you see her tits, she's all dressed up, she's getting, putting on, like, little dominatrix gear. But in that scene, she's interacting with Deckard. She has a personality of her own. She knows how to deal with him. She knows how to deal with, like, anyone she doesn't like. I love her little quip about how he's like, you wouldn't imagine the kind of thing that men would do to see a naked woman. And she's like, yes, I can. Obviously, I do this every day. What do you think is going on? And then she's able to trick him in the situation and work for herself by, with her whole runaway scene, she's able to outwit him for a little bit of time. And honestly, yeah, she gets murdered, but it's kind of a badass way to go out. Just like, crash, crash. And then also comparing her to Daryl Hannah's character, they're completely opposite personalities, which is part of what makes it more interesting. They're the same model, quote unquote, but the way they talk is completely different. What they say is completely different. Their mannerisms are completely different. The way they use their sexuality is completely different. And that's part of what makes them actual, like, well-defined three-dimensional characters. In this movie, when you look at the way that Kay interacts with the pink-haired chick, she's like, hey, you want to have sex? Do you want to have sex? You want to have sex? You want to have sex? Okay, I'm taking my shirt off. See, we're going to have sex now. And, I slipped a little thing in your jacket. Oh, and then I showed up later, and that's it. She doesn't interact with him in any way. She doesn't have, like, her own distinct flavor to separate her from Joy. There's this really interesting... This is, again, like, the way that I think that the animators and the production designers are honestly better directors than Denise is. Denis? Whatever.
Denis Villeneuve.
Whatever. I don't fucking care. Is because it's a really gorgeous on, in the scene, the way that she and Joy are overlapping, and the way that they are behaving differently, and the way they are trying to sync up. And the visuals are, like, so insane looking. It's incredible what they were able to pull off visually. But then, on a more emotional level, you can kind of see them trying to work together, but being two distinctly different people. But when you look at them on paper, there's no difference.
Actually, now that I think about it, what is interesting about Joy is the fact that, I said some other things, but, like, what is interesting is, I think what could be the case is she's on that precipice of artificial intelligence, but she hasn't quite reached it. Like, there's a disconnect, and she's trying different things to try to figure out where she can lead to become, but she gets cut short of that life. That's what I could see.
But she's never trying to do anything besides just, what do you want me to do for you? Or even, like, when you look at the difference between, like, the different models of Joy.
Yeah.
Like, when you look at the pink Joy and you look at, like, the Joy that he has in his apartment, it would have been really cute. Like, I think that would have been a good idea if, like, you had seen, like, the pink Joy emulating something very, like, what you thought was specific to the other Joy.
Mm.
Or, like, even if the pink Joy recognized him because they're part of the same system. But in the end, it just kind of feels like that's what they did with all the girls. They all just kind of feel the same. There's not really a difference between, Michaela Shannon, let's call her. Okay, I'm sorry, when she says, where is he? It just sounds like, I will find him! Like, she makes the same, like, bug-eyed face. But, like, there's not really a difference between her and Robin Wright's character.
Yeah, I will say...
all the women are, like, the same flavor candy over and over again.
I will say I was really disappointed that Robin Wright didn't have a physicality in this film because, like, we saw Wonder Woman this year. As much criticism as I want to give Wonder Woman, she was fucking awesome in it.
Well, that was one of the problems with Wonder Woman is, why wasn't there more Robin Wright? But then that's one of the problems with Blade Runner. Why isn't there more Robin Wright?
Yeah, and, like, we can clearly see that she has the physical capability to do stuff. This movie, like, okay, so the original film didn't have a ton of fight choreography, but there were some great choreographed scenes, especially with the fight with Deckard and Roy.
Well, there was real stakes with that. I mean, everything felt difficult. In a good way, like it should, And there was a difference between like that fight scene and the fight scene with that he had with Daryl Hannah. The choreography had two different personalities, whereas the fight choreography in this movie was just like watching somebody hit a hammer against a wall every time.
Yeah, and the fight that he had with what was her name? The woman who was part of the LAPD.
Robin Wright?
No, the other woman. The replicant woman that he was fighting, that Ryan Gosling was fighting, the one that kicked a lot?
Yeah, she's not part of the LAPD. She was Wendell's sidekick.
No, yeah. Sorry.
That's why I got confused. Sorry.
No, she was working through their systems, but
right.
Yeah. What I was trying to say was, like, one thing that really disappoints me about this movie is the fight choreography is terrible.
It's really bad.
And while I enjoyed many aspects of the movie, that is not a problem with the first movie, nor should it be a problem with modern day films, because there are tons and tons and tons of television shows have great fight choreography now. Mm-hmm. There is no excuse nowadays, especially with a big budget film, to have poor fight choreography. Another thing that I do want to complain about, because this is a huge sin for me, I am sick and tired of seeing, a woman can fight, she uses her legs, she kicks a lot. She's a replicant. She has equal strength with her legs and her upper body.
Actually, no, she doesn't. She specifically has super strength.
So why is she kicking? Yeah, why is she kicking all the time?
Because it makes her ass look good.
Yeah, but I hate that. I hate this notion in action movies. Oh, you have the guys, they fight with their arms. You have the ladies, they fight with their legs. Why can't people just fight? Like, why can't people use all of that?
Well, in real life, there is a disproportion between...
Yeah, but not with a fucking replicant!
I agree with you.
Also, like, Daryl Hannah, while she did use her legs, she was using the physicality of her legs as a weapon, not kicking all the time.
Well, yeah, but also she was incorporating, like, her gymnastics into into those scenarios.
Yeah, like the scene where she almost turns Deckard's head all the way around.
Yeah. The thing is like, yes, we've seen that before, but at that time, that was still a pretty interesting new idea. And a lot of people since then have done it kind of over and over again. But at the time, that was a lot more imaginative, but also set her fight with Deckard apart from Deckard's fight with Roy, since they happen one right after another. The problem with all of the fights in this movie is all of the fights have like the same 5 to 7 moves over and over again, and the choreography doesn't change depending on the characters. It's like watching Street Fighter when both opponents are the same character and you only have the same moves.
Yeah, and then you have the fight with Deckard and Kay, mm-hmm. where you have the 50s backdrop going on, and it's one of those fight scenes that the way it's filmed...
It looks like nobody can throw a punch in this movie.
Yeah, and it's really disappointing because you know who the cinematographer is in this movie?
Roger Deakins.
Who is considered by many to be the greatest cinematographer alive today. The greatest cinematographer alive today.
Possibly and I'm watching contention with Emmanuel Lubezki, but yeah.
And watching the scene, okay, now that I'm thinking about it, it's like, well, you can partly hearken this to some of the post-production stuff because, like, while they're fighting, they're like these
holographic projections,
holographic things, like, get in the way of the fight. Mm-hmm. Like, and I'm distracted. I don't even know what I'm looking at. And I know a lot of people have that complaint with Transformers, and I don't want to bring Transformers into this.
But do it anyway.
But I'm going to do it. Transformers, as much as people go, oh my God, like I can't tell what's going on. There is direction to where those robots are going. They don't just plop random things in the middle of the robots fighting, like, you know, like neon things, like right in front of the robots fighting. Like, what was that? What was that?
Also, I like that every fight scene had to somehow involve Ryan Gosling going through a wall. Even the one where he just casually ripped through a wall at one point. Like, he just casually walked through a stone wall. Okay.
I thought that was a
that was just fucking goofy.
I thought it was a cute homage to Roy Batty stuff, but like that scene where like Roy Batty like shoves his head through the wall, that had stakes to it. Plus, he was also damaged by that when he did it.
Mm-hmm. Whereas in this one, like, you can just beat the shit out of Ryan Gosling and he's fine.
Granted, you
really
could
matter.
make the argument in talking about world building, these are Nexus 8, and in that film, they were Nexus 6. So there is a difference in model.
But not a lot. They're still built out of human bones, apparently. They still have, like, the same skin and blood. They can still drown, of all fucking things. Why can replicants drown? I don't understand.
Well, they're
that.
more human than human, and that's like part of it,
But
too.
at a certain point, why do you want your slave labor to be so fucking delicate?
So that they can't have a huge up.
I get that. I'm not saying don't build, like, a self-destruct button. That makes sense to me. But why would you implicitly give all of your slave labor the same weaknesses that everybody else has? Now they can't do the kind of work that you don't want to do.
Also, I gotta say, one thing that I do think is really strange, and one thing that I don't understand, especially when you're doing a sequel, is why the fuck haven't we, like, even in the short films, why the fuck haven't we seen the Offworld yet?
That's true. Like, oh, there's...
We got a glimpse of it in the animation, but, like...
Well, we also still haven't seen any visual of the robot uprising. Like, even Terminator 2 actually had some footage of...
Well, the first Terminator did, too.
The first Terminator did, too, a little bit. But, like, with the first Terminator, it was a first movie and it had a limited budget. I get that. With this one, it's like, what? Okay, you put one sentence on a black screen, thanks.
Yeah, I'd like to see those scene beams glitter in the darkness. I'd like to see attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. That would be awesome.
No, it can't do that. It's not derivative enough. That means we'd actually have to, like, think about it and use our imagination and, like, try to do something new, and we refuse to do that, goddammit. It's gotta look exactly like the original, except for when it looks exactly like Arrival, which is most of the movie.
Another complaint that I will have, you know, even though, like, I actually did enjoy this film, contrary to you, another complaint that I will have is this movie did a really interesting thing. At the very beginning of the movie, I was like, wow, the costuming is actually really cool, practical, interesting, all that kind of stuff. I like the fact that Ryan Gosling was wearing a jacket that covered his face, because that made sense. If you're going to go in an area that has like a lot of dust and all that kind of stuff, having that incorporated into the jacket makes sense. Like that, and the suit that Dave Bautista wore when he was in his like caterpillar maggot farm, like that was a really interesting design. However, that's about it.
You're totally right. A lot of it is just like modern clothes. Yeah,
it's like one of the things. I gotta look this character up because it's bugging me. But the toy maker in the original, like he.
I love his hat. His hat looks like a toilet plunger, and I'm like, what the fuck is that? I love it. That is weird. That is fucking weird. That was great. It looked awful. It was wonderful. There's nothing with that much flavor in this movie.
Oh, J.F. Sebastian, that's his name.
You're right, it is J.F. Sebastian. You're right.
But one of the things that I really liked about his design was it was sort of like 1930s slummy mixed in with a little bit of Victorian style. Like there was that there was like that neck piece that looked like something straight out of like a Shakespeare play on his outfit. It was like really strange and eclectic. And like his house was strange and eclectic. I mean, you could smell the dust in his place.
Well, everything in the original felt like it was real. Like, can we get into the PD? Because I hate the PD in this movie.
Oh, I think the PD is good for today, but it definitely... I can agree with you that compared to the original, there's stuff.
Most of this movie is like open negative space. Lots of white. Lots of gray. lots of same single golden tone, lots of mists. Everything is open and wide and deserted. And like, even when they actually have the shot-for-shot recreation of the cityscape from the original, it's all covered in mist and you can't see anything, and there's like one fucking car there, and like there's no life. Like, it feels empty. It feels like, it's so odd that, you know, there's a lot of stuff about like childhood and whatever. There are no children in the movie. Which I think is especially weird because there are apparently naked women all over the fucking place. Like, do children not exist socially?
What are you talking about? There's a whole scene where there are hundreds of children doing child labor, and the character from the character from The Walking Dead even tries to sell one of them as a sex slave.
But not in the city.
You do see a couple. Now, part of that is world building. What the fuck, movie? Why is this in your short film but not in your main film? Because you did see the little kid that was in the world in the second film.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I get that.
There's like no life in the city though. Like, everything feels so.
That's not true, because you had like the Polish women, like in that apartment. There was that whole scene.
I loved how there were like all these people in the hallway, but you didn't take that and expand it in the city.
Well,
there's always room to move when he's like walking around. Like, he's like, when he's literally like outside eating food and being harassed by prostitutes, there's all this room and space. Like, there's not enough people around. It's so weird.
Well, I think part of what you're talking about is kind of a problem with modern films is they don't want to pay the money to have lots of extras.
I don't know. No. They were working with Weta, and Weta perfected the ability to have individually rendered extras from fucking Lord of the Rings, which was almost like, what, 15 years ago at this point?
Yeah, plus they've done work on Game of Thrones with crowds and...
Yeah, I mean, you can do that digitally. That's fine. That's fine. But, like, there's no feeling of being cramped. There's no feeling of, like, life and virility. When you look at what's going on, it's not just the fact that there's not a lot of people. There's not a lot of personality to it. Like, when you look at all these scenes in the original Blade Runner, they're doing stuff. They're attacking his car. They're interacting with each other. They're like pushing each other around. They're talking to him in different ways. You know, in this one, you had like one scene where you talk to the one dude who, like, I give the movie credit. They actually let him speak a foreign language, kind of. But the guy he goes to, like, to get appraisal for his wood, you know, okay, but there were like 4 scenes like that in the original. There's no personality to the city, and then most of the time you're not in the city. Most of the time you're in big empty space. You're on a big empty farm with nobody around. You're in big empty deserted anti-Los Angeles. You're in big empty wide misty space with literally nobody but Kay, and it's boring.
I will say it's interesting that they changed a lot of the Asian atmosphere. While it is there, they changed like a lot of actors to be like what, like Eastern European. Mm-hmm. You know, so you had like Polish and Russian. So like there seemed to be an attempt to sort of.
I kind of like that they tried to make it more worldly, though, because like they were really embedded in the Japanese culture in the original. But even in the original, I'm like, nobody speaks the predominant language. What the fuck is going on? At least in this movie, there's like a bit of everything. There's Arabic over here. There's Korean over here. There's Japanese over here.
Like at one point, I was looking at one of the signs and I was like, oh wow, that's Hindi.
Yeah, like there's all this different. I like that if there is one thing you're gonna modernize, you're making it more worldly like that. Especially because like that was in the casting in the original movie. Yeah. Like one of the guys he goes to is Egyptian. You know, that's interesting. But like in this movie, you still didn't like. You did that with the set dressing and like not very much else. Like one thing I thought was kind of I thought the movie was gonna go here and they didn't, and it kills me, is like the chick replicant that was hanging out with Jared Leto goes up to him and she has like this mahjong set, and the mahjong set has like a bunch of different characters like a bunch of different alphabets on it, and she attaches it to his ear. I thought it was going to be a translation device to like allow you to speak in different languages or something like that. I was like, duh, of course. Why isn't that like everywhere? Because you can't ask anybody to speak anything other than English in a Hollywood movie. Like, you literally can't even make the attempt. You just don't do it.
There were several scenes in the movie where other languages were spoken.
Yeah, but not by anyone in the main cast, ever.
Yeah.
You just can't even bother to do that. You literally can't do that, apparently.
So this film is very...
Logan come out, and one of the characters was speaking Spanish with no subtitles for most of her speaking role.
Yeah, so...
And everybody loved her.
Like I said, the movie is flawed. I think...
That's also not what those mahjong pieces were for. I don't know what the fuck that was.
One thing that I will say that I liked about this movie, which I think will be a source of contention with a lot of people, maybe even a contention with us, is I like the fact that there were moments where this movie breathed, because...
Like the entire movie?
Okay, so there were some parts, but like, you know, that is sort of the Blade Runner atmosphere. And like, while I think the aerial shots don't work in this film because there's
nothing to look at.
There were other moments where I liked the silence. I liked, you know, just kind of absorbing what I was seeing. I really liked the environment that Jared Leto was in. I thought the design... So I got to get into this because when I was young, my mom worked at a seminary. And at that seminary, there was a baptismal pool that looked very similar to that, which I think is like what they're trying to allude to. But it was always like this like really interesting design of like just being surrounded by water and like a platform. And I was just like, why don't I see this in movies? Like,
we saw that in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them.
That was more of like a swimming pool. If you want to talk about what this kind of looks like, it kind of looks like the apartment suite that the villain has in Old Boy.
Mm-hmm. I get you.
I like that. I don't know. It's a visual aesthetic that I like, and I liked looking at it in the film. I don't know what it was trying to say other than
having the most impractical light scheme, humanly possible. Like, okay. Blade Runner has some of the best lighting in a film, period. There's lots of overlapping color, lots of different lights going off on different timers. It looks very difficult to watch because that's how uncomfortable it feels being in the middle of like a city environment like that. But in this movie, everything is like perfectly color coordinated, and all of the light is like very samey.
Yeah, there's definitely a monochromatic look, especially with like the oranges scenes. Anytime there was orange in the scene, it was literally there was very little gradation.
Well, and it was also all lit exactly the same all over the screen.
Yeah,
but in the scenes where you're at like Wendell's whatever his little headquarters. It was all, of course, it was all monochromatic gold. It was all the same one fucking color. It's all gold and black. But you had, like, the lighting was all, like, lit downwards, like it was underneath water. So, like, you had, like, this wave effect. But then there was, like, this rolling blackout that would happen no matter where you were. So, you know, you would see things and then you wouldn't. And then you would see things and then you wouldn't. And there's no, like, diegetic reason for it. And it didn't add anything to like the scenes. It was just like, wow, you'd have to be blind to live there.
Yeah.
Because how the fuck else are you going to get anything done?
Now, there's a Polish artist that I'm very fond of, and there's a piece that he did that sort of has the same color scheme as that oranges thing, and I think that might have been an allusion to that. I forget what his name is because I don't speak Polish, and his name is like very hard to say, but it starts with a Z. I'll try to find it. But he's one of my favorite artists, and I could see like an homage to that. But like when they went to this dilapidated world, which if you watch Blackout 2022, you find out that there's like a whole nuclear explosion that happens, and that could partly explain like why there's less people in the world now than there was in the original Blade Runner, because a lot of people died but I get your frustration with it.
Yeah. I also have to say, like, exactly like you were saying with the original, how everything feels lived in. Everything feels just, like, so bland and empty. Like, in the original, you see replicants who, like, they keep little tchotchkes, they keep photographs of their life, you know. They have all this clutter, and they have, like, their hobbies right there, you know. It feels like a real life, you know. You had the toy maker, of course, with all of his toys, was kind of the more eccentric set. But even if you look at, like, the racist cop's office room, there's, like, a lot of stuff to make it feel lived in. But in all of the sets in Blade Runner, it's always very empty and, like, no personality. So, like, Kay's apartment is all gray, nothing except for the little horse on the side table. You know, there's nothing in his entire apartment that has any sort of personality to it. Which makes sense in Ghost in the Shell when, like, she doesn't know what her identity is and her body feels foreign to her and she doesn't understand the need for, like, materialistic things. But we already have a mythos of, like, we even have in that deleted scene short film with the only character that I actually liked in this movie with the glasses, giving his favorite book to his daughter. They have interests. You know, they're not just like, I am automaton, I just need a place to charge my battery. You know, there's just no personality there, but it's kind of the same all over. Like, even when you look at where Deckard lives now, there's bottles of beer everywhere. He reads sometimes and awkwardly quotes Treasure Island, so we'll put stacks of books here. And that's it. Everything else is just, like, the same shit you would see at a casino, and that's it. There's nothing there to give personality or flavor.
Well, yeah, I think that's a problem with films in general.
Everything
nowadays.
Feels like iPod sleek. Like when you go into when you go into Robin Wright's office, it feels like it came off of the J.J. Abrams Star Trek. It doesn't feel like she works there or lives there.
Yeah, and that is kind of bleeding into our culture now, this IKEA look, where, you know, you don't have anything on the walls. There's a minimalist aesthetic, which every time that I've looked at fiction, like before, like nowadays, people that lived minimalist lives were viewed as crazy, isolated, that kind of thing. Like, and I get you can go for that with, like, Ryan Gosling's character, but that's not how, like, everything should
sister. Look. With her, it actually does make sense because she creates stuff around her. Like, she's never just in that room. Well, and it also works with her character to show, like, she could look at anything she wants, but that's not the reality of what's around her. So that sort of, like, compare and contrast in the same physical space works in that instance.
I really wish she was in the movie more.
Yeah, it's like, oh, the entire movie's about this one character. Let's put her in 2 scenes.
Because she actually had some really interesting ideas and stuff.
Oh, one thing I did love in this movie was, like, I did wonder in the original movie, like, how do you make memories? Like, how do you manufacture memories? And, like, the original movie gets into it a little bit, but that was something I was kind of playing around with. And it was cool to see her actually make memories. Everything about the setup in that scene doesn't work. The way she talks to him doesn't work. The direction, like, the physical direction in that scene doesn't work. The fact that she is like, hey, you're over here. Do you mind if I go over here and work a little bit? Okay, now that I've told this little story to illustrate my point and give a nice exposition, I'll come back over here. You know, nothing worked, but actually seeing her physically make the memory was very, very cool.
Yeah.
You know, there are clearly artists who are better at storytelling and giving emotional direction than the actual director of this movie.
If I were going to say what I thought was the best scene in the entire movie, I would say it's the birthday cake.
The birthday cake was phenomenal. That whole sequence was so great. But that's like one great aspect of one great moment inside of a bigger scene that doesn't function at all.
And the cake is a lie.
The cake is a lie, yeah. Like, and that's the problem. It's like, when you had, like, the sex prostitute scene, like, yes, the overlappingness was, like, such a beautiful little moment, but the character motivation to get to that scene doesn't work, and the lines that are delivered in that scene don't work, and then the conclusion to that scene doesn't work, and it's all very stupid and shallow. You have really good artists doing really good work with some very inventive ideas, and somebody at the front who didn't know where the fuck to take it. Also kind of getting into the fact that, like, the most interesting character was the one with the least amount of screen time and was the first person to be killed, kind of like in that vein. The main emotional identity mystery of the movie does not stack up to the Blade Runner one. Like, yes, the idea that Deckard is a replicant is, like, so obvious that even when you rewatch it, it doesn't really help a lot because, like, it's not that obfuscated, but, like, there's enough other stuff going on character-wise and story-wise to keep it interesting. It's fine. But, like, with this movie, every time, like, there was a plot reveal, it was just like, yes, we figured that out, like, a half hour ago. What are you doing? When it was like, oh, he's the kid. It was kind of like,
well,
no,
I did actually kind of
no,
like...
he's not the kid. It was yeah, we figured that out. They set up everything so obviously originally that by the time the characters catch up, the audience is already like, and there's not enough storyline going on there to make that work. There's no, like, overlapping storylines or overlapping character developments happening. Yeah. It's all very, and then this, and then this, and it's boring.
I don't know. I thought these scenes were interesting. It was very much a collection of interesting scenes for me. I think the through narrative isn't as strong as I would have liked it to be, or anywhere near as interesting or compelling as the original film, which, while the original film does have its faults, especially because the original film does feel like a collection of sort of philosophical arguments.
It's very The Dark Knight.
Yeah, this film sort of does the same thing, but has less to say.
It has significantly less to say, and kind of in a lot of cases, I kind of don't think it knows what it's trying to say.
Yeah, probably the most frustrating scene in the entire movie was when Kay is dying, they literally play the exact music that they played when Roy was dying in the original Blade Runner.
Yes, but that's still better than literally all the other music they had in the movie, because the music in this movie was really terrible. It's like, yes, we understand that him fighting the horse is a big moment. You don't have to accentuate it with a giant...
Well, what's weird about the composer was that the composer got fired and then they got somebody else. So also feels like they rushed.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if that's why there's so much negative space in this movie. I wonder if it got to a point where they didn't have enough time to render full environments. So they just went with, like, empty negative space.
Well, I thought what they did looked good.
Well, that's the thing. What is not going to put out subpar work? So I wonder if they went with, like, a distinct decision of, like, we don't have enough time to do this quality of work for the entire film. So we're just going to have, like, big stretches of a single color.
So the production budget was $150 million. So far, the movie has made domestically $31 million. Worldwide, it's made $50 million. So it's...
Opening weekend?
Opening weekend, yes. It's a bomb. Like the original was.
Don't put it like that. The original was actually good.
Well, the original one is a masterpiece, but, well, it's a flawed masterpiece, but it is a masterpiece.
If it was perfect, they wouldn't have recut it a million times. There's a lot of truth to that. There is a lot of truth to that honest trailer jab, though.
I will say that I would add one more cut to the movie. I know there have been several cuts, but I would take the voiceover out at the end with Gaff.
Mm-hmm.
We already heard the line. We don't need to hear it again. We just heard it.
Mm-hmm.
The whole, she'll never live, but then again, who does? And then if you watch the theatrical cut, it's like, she'll never live, but then again, who does? And then, like, Deckard says it, and then there's another line, talking about Roy, and then it's like, oh yeah, we got it. We got it. I'm glad that there wasn't voiceover for this film. That was a smart choice. I don't know. I still kind of liked it, but it's flawed, and I'm not gonna say that It probably won't make my top 10 because this is a really good year for blockbusters.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I know a lot of people are quick to say otherwise, but to be honest, like, we didn't see Baywatch. We didn't see Transformers 5. We didn't see the Emoji Movie. This was not an F movie for me because there were definitely artists with very good ideas and very clear intentions who were able to do very masterful, small, like, encapsulated bubble moments inside of a much crappier feature project, you know.
Do you think this movie is 89%?
No, it is not that good. The characters are not compelling enough. The storyline is not interesting enough. The pacing doesn't push the narrative along any further. There's not enough philosophical, metaphorical meat to it to really make you think about anything. It's a perfect movie to put on if you want to fall asleep.
Now, I will say that if you haven't seen it yet and you want a great successor to Blade Runner, watch the original animated Ghost in the Shell.
Or you could watch the Metropolis anime, actually.
You could do that too. I was talking about like mood and environment and stuff like that. Watch its sequel as well. The Ghost in the Shell
Innocence.
Standalone. Yeah, Innocence. Ghost in the Shell Innocence.
It is very good and very underrated, I think.
Yeah, and also feels really Blade Runner-esque as well.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're craving that kind of stuff, check it out. Also, there's a great video game on Steam, Shadowrun. It's a great indie cyberpunk game.
Oh, you could also read Battle Angel Alita.
And I really like the Deus Ex games, so there's that too. And there's a lot of love for that.
Or if like you really want to like watch a movie that's kind of trying to do something similar and evocative but is more modernized, watch Ex Machina. Yeah. I think Ex Machina is a great successor to Blade Runner and Spirit and not just a direct lesser clone.
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's RoboCop from the 80s, Terminator from the 90s. The Matrix is in there as well.
Of course.
I mean, Blade Runner is possibly one of the most influential films ever.
To the point where anything cyberpunk looks like Blade Runner.
Yeah, well, it created a genre.
No, I know it created a genre, but it does kind of annoy me that, like the aesthetic of cyberpunk hasn't evolved at all since Blade Runner.
That's not 100% true,
No, it's not 100% true, but as a generality for a very small niche genre, when's it going to evolve into something more? Speaking of evolving into something more, I've got to point out a really big plot point with this movie. There's a point where Michael Shannon, stand-in, like, takes Robin Wright's face and puts it against, like, the face scanner and it accepts. We have the technology now where you can't do that with dead people anymore. We already have that technology for something like that to not happen. The fuck are you doing?
That's a nitpick, but it's acceptable.
But it's like, it's going back to this thing of, like, you're not evolving to the point where, like, modern technology has evolved past the futuristic sci-fi genre.
Well,
what are you doing?
Well, to be fair to the world of Blade Runner is set in an alternate timeline because 2019 is when the first Blade Runner takes place. Obviously,
but it's 2017 now.
Yeah, obviously the world that's in Blade Runner is not the world that will exist in 2019.
Well, yeah, obviously. No, I get that. Obviously, it's still it's still fiction. But when it comes to, like, the actual sci-fi elements, like, come on, dude. I get it, we're not going to have flying cars in 2019. Obviously, that's fine, but that's more evolved than what we're at right now.
I mean, we could have flying cars. The only problem is terrorism is going to prevent that from happening.
We do have drones. There were drones in this movie.
And there's been some talk about air taxis, but I don't know the logistics of that. Also, terrorism is, something that was oddly absent of this movie, even though it was very prevalent in the prequel stuff.
Yeah,
for this movie.
Yeah.
Now that I think about it, yeah, it's really weird because, like, that whole blackout seemed like, why wouldn't the fact that a terrorist event to other people's minds that is a terrorist So, like, the fact that they wouldn't have said, oh, there was a terrorist attack that, blah, 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 it just kind of blows my mind. You have the devastation of the city, but, like, it holds no weight if you haven't seen that short.
Yeah, absolutely. But, I mean, that's one of the big things about this movie that makes it boring, is it feels like they had all of these opportunities and all of these setups and just went nowhere.
Well, apparently they're trying to go somewhere in 2 other movies.
Dude, I already wasted 3 hours of my life on this. I'm not going back for seconds.
I'm too much of a hardcore Blade Runner fan to do that, but, like, I totally understand you. Yes, I know, I'm crazy, but
3 hours of
this movie,
nothing.
This movie was really long.
It felt longer than it was. I spent about 3/4 of this movie waiting for it to be over because it was boring.
I didn't. I found...
Okay, let me put it to you like this. At the beginning of Blade Runner, when you're first getting adjusted to the world, you have, like, your impressions and your feelings and sort of, like, your mindset about, the certain topics that they're going to discuss. By the end of the movie, you feel differently than at the beginning of the movie. The movie went somewhere and brought up some ideas, and people can, like, think different things based on who they are, but, like, at the end of Blade Runner, you don't think the same things you thought at the beginning of Blade Runner. With this movie, nothing went any, like, there was no development. I didn't feel anything different from the beginning of this Blade Runner than I did at the end.
I will say that, unfortunately, I felt less empathy to Ryan Gosling's character as the film progressed.
Yeah, because he didn't go like, he never changed. All these things happened to him, but he didn't evolve at all as a character. He is essentially a male Ariel from The Little Mermaid.
I mean, you could make that argument about the first...
Except less spoiling.
No, actually, I was going to say, like, oh, you can make that argument about the first one, but then, like, all the stuff with, like, Rachel and then, like, his...
Rachel and Deckard are dramatically different people at the end of the movie than they were at the beginning. And their relationship with each other is very different.
Yeah.
Kay is not a different person, despite having gone out and found his identity and then have lost it and then have regained it again and then dying. Like...
No, like, it's one of those things. I totally understand your criticisms of the film, and I accept the film more than you. I'll probably watch it again. I know you won't, but compared to a lot of films that come out these days, and I'm not talking about this year, I'm just talking about in general, this is definitely a higher class of film. It's at least trying to do interesting things. Certainly doesn't succeed with all of them, but I like the fact that at least some movies have the ambition to look slightly different than other things coming out.
You think this Blade Runner movie looks any different than anything else? Did this movie look any different than Valerian?
Yeah.
Or the original Ghost in the Shell movie that came out this year? Not the original, the earlier.
Oh yeah, it looks a lot better. It looks a lot better.
Of course it looks a lot better, but A, you had the animation studio do the same thing for both, and B, one of them was literally trying to be a...
Valerian does look different. Valerian is a very different movie. And when Valerian decides, hey, we're going to be a movie you haven't seen before, all that shit's great.
Okay, fair enough. You saw it, I didn't, so...
That is a really frustrating movie because there are moments of excellence in that movie. And then you have Dane DeLeon butchering every single line that comes out of his mouth.
Mm-hmm. I am going to say, what this movie makes me really want is I want to see a movie made by Weta. Not just like they're the animation department, because that's excellent. But watching their work on the piece of crap that was the Ghost in the Shell movie, and watching their work in this movie, I'm like, you could make a beautiful, emotional movie. Like, start with a short. That's fine. See how that does. But I'd like to see Weta as a studio take control over all creative elements of making a movie. I'd like to see them write and direct something.
I think they made Warcraft. I'm not sure.
Do I have to eat my words now? I haven't seen Warcraft, so I can't say that's a, like, piece of crap movie, but, like, that doesn't exactly inspire confidence.
I do know that they are actively working on the Planet of the Apes video game. I mean, that's a different section, but
honestly, that game looks great.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like an interactive movie, but it looks really compelling. Like, it looks like a Telltale game. So if you like Telltale games, this one looks like a great Telltale-esque game.
Except for with better graphics.
The graphics are decent. I mean, they're not AAA quality, but they are really good. Mm-hmm. Anyways, that's been our talk of Blade Runner. If you liked our talk and you would like to come on the show, bring up a topic, we sometimes do reviews, but we also like doing topics. So if there are any topics of discussion that you would like us to talk about and maybe join in on the show, I know that we had somebody want to talk about soundtracks, which I'm totally open to doing, especially since we had comments about this film. If there are any disagreements that you have, we're pretty much worn out with Wonder Woman now. We might have a couple more talks about it, but we're trying to move on from our dissenting opinion on that film. Let us know what you thought of Blade Runner 2049.
And if you thought that there was a deeper meaning to having all of the giant naked women in this movie, please let us know. Because it's not nearly as interesting as it was in Clockwork Orange.
Which it was obviously paying homage to. Thanks for listening.